welcome to another chapter of reading. So let's get started, shall we? Chapter 25, The Seer Overheard. The fact that Harry Potter was going out with Ginny Weasley seemed to interest a great number of people, most of them girls. Yet Harry found himself newly and happily impervious to gossip over the next few weeks. After all, it made a very nice change to be talked about because of something that was making him happier than he could remember being for a very long time, rather than because he had been involved in horrific scenes of dark magic. I agree. It is a nice change. Harry definitely needs this happiness, you know? You'd think people had better things to gossip about, said Ginny as she sat on the common room floor, leaning against Harry's legs and reading the Daily Prophet. 3 Dementors attacking me, and over melted veins is asking me if it's true you've got a hippogriff tattooed across your chest. Ron and Hermione both roared with laughter. Harry ignored them. What did you tell her? I told her it's Hungarian horntail, said Ginny, turning a page of the newspaper idly. Much more macho. Oh, Ginny, that is just perfect. Thanks, said Harry, grinning. And what did you tell her Ron got? A pygmy puff, but I didn't say where. This is why I love Ginny. She is so funny. Although now I'm curious, how do wizarding tattoos work? Are they also animated like the pictures, or are they like Muggle ones that stay on in like just a picture? So many questions. Although I confess, if it is the former, that would be very cool. Like, can you imagine a tattoo of a lion roaring at you as someone shows it off? Like, that'd be cool. But seriously though, how do wizarding tattoos work? Anyway, Ron scowled as Hermione rolled around laughing. Watch it, he said, pointing warningly at Harry and Ginny. Just because I've given my permission doesn't mean I can't withdraw it. Your permission, scoffed Ginny. So did you give me permission to do anything? Anyway, you said yourself you'd rather it was Harry than Michael or Dean. Yeah, I would, said Ron grudgingly. And just as long as you don't start snogging each other in public. Filthy hypocrite! What about you and Lavender dashing around like a pair of eels all over the place? Demanded Ginny. But Ron's tolerance was not to be tested much as they moved into June, for Harry and Ginny's time together was becoming increasingly restricted. Ginny's hours were approaching, and she was therefore forced to study for hours into the night. On one such evening, when Ginny had retired to the library, and Harry was sitting beside the window in the common room, supposedly finishing his herbology homework, but in reality reliving a particularly happy hour he had spent down by the lake with Ginny at lunchtime, Hermione dropped into the seat between him and Ron with an unpleasantly purposeful look on her face. I want to talk to you, Harry. What about? Said Harry suspiciously. Only the previous day, Hermione told him off for distracting Ginny when she ought to be working hard for her examinations. The so-called half-blood prince. Oh, not again, he groaned. Will you please drop it? He had not dared to return to the room of requirement to retrieve his book, and his performance in potions was suffering accordingly. Though Slughorn, who approved of Ginny, had jocularly attributed this to Harry being lovesick. Slughorn, we love you. We really do. But Harry was sure that Snape had given up hope on laying hands on the prince's book, and was determined to leave it where it was while Snape remained on the lookout. "Not dropping it," said Hermione firmly, until you hear me out. Now I've been trying to find a bit about who might make a hobby of inventing dark spells. Didn't make a hobby of it. He. Who says it's a he? We've been through this, said Harry crossly. Prince, Hermione. Prince. Right, said Hermione, red patches blazing in her cheeks as she pulled a very old piece of newsprint out of her pocket and slammed it down on the table in front of Harry. Look at that! Look at the picture! Harry picked up the crumbling piece of paper and stared at the moving photograph, yellowed with age. Ron leaned over for a look too. The picture showed a skinny girl of around 15. She was not pretty. Well, I would disagree, but I'm just reading how it is. She looked simultaneously cross and sullen, with heavy brows and a long pallid face. Underneath the photograph was the caption, Eileen Prince, captain of the Hogwarts Gobstones team. So, said Harry. Also, that name comes important later. Said Harry, scanning the short news item to which the picture belonged. It was a rather dull story about inter-school competitions. Her name was Eileen Prince. Prince Harry. Again, that name is important, and if advanced Potterheads know their wizarding lineage like I do, then they know exactly who this is. New Potterheads, you're just gonna have to wait, because I really don't want to give out spoilers. They looked at each other, and Harry realized what Hermione was trying to say. He burst out laughing. No way. What? You think she was the half-blood? Oh, come on. Well, why not, Harry? There aren't any real princes in the wizarding world. I personally would beg to differ, because I'm sure there are nobility somewhere along the lines. It's just probably lost in the lost with descendants, or just not enough people telling about their stories. I don't know. I'm spectacularly failing at this, I know, but bear with me, please. Anyhow, it's either a nickname, a made-up title somebody's given themselves, or it could be their actual name, couldn't it? Now listen! If, say, her father was a wizard, her surname was Prince, and her mother was a muggle, then that would make her a half-blood prince. Well, Hermione, you're kind of on the right track here as to the true identity of the half-blood prince. But at the same time, not exactly. And for those wondering the true identity, please wait. I do not want to give out spoilers prematurely. But advanced Potterheads, you already know. Anyway. Yeah, very ingenious, Hermione. But it would! Maybe she was proud of being half a prince. Listen, Hermione, I can tell it's not a girl. I can just tell. The truth is said you don't think a girl could have been clever enough, said Hermione eagerly. How could I have gone around with you for 5 years and not think girls are clever? Said Harry, stunned by this. Yeah, I'm on Harry's team on this side. I'm with Harry in this circumstance. And if I do say so myself, I'm clever in my own regards too. They just have more towards creativity than potions, I guess. Moving on before I make this awkward. It's the way he writes. I just know the principal's a bloke. I can tell. This girl hasn't got anything to do with it. Well, you're kind of wrong here, Harry. It kind of does have something to do with the actual identity of the Half-Blood Prince, just not in the way you're thinking. And before I make this even more awkward, I'm gonna go back. Where did you get this anyway? The library, said Hermione predictably. Oh, Hermione, we love you being a Virgo. There's a whole collection of old prophets up there. I'm going to find out more about Eileen Prince if I can. Enjoy yourself, said Harry irritably. I will, said Hermione. And the first place I'll look, she shot him as she reached the portrait hole, is records of old potions of wolves. Harry scowled after her for a moment, then continued his contemplation of the darkening sky. She's just never got over you outperforming her potions, said Ron, returning to his copy of 1,000 Magical Herbs and Fungi. I don't think I'm mad wanting that book back, do you? Of course not, said Ron robustly. He was a genius, the prince. Anyway, that is our trip. He drew his finger significantly across his own throat. I wouldn't be here to discuss it, would I? I mean, I'm not saying that spell you used on Malfoy was great. Nor am I, said Harry quickly. But he healed all right, didn't he? Back on his feet in no time. Yeah, said Harry. This was perfectly true. Although his conscience squirmed slightly all the same. Thanks to Snape. We still got detention with Snape this Saturday, Ron continued. Yeah, and the Saturday after that, and the Saturday after that, sighed Harry. And he's hinting now that if I don't get all those boxes done by the end of the term, we'll carry on next year. He was finding these detentions particularly irksome because they cut into the already limited time he could have been spending time with Ginny. Indeed, he frequently wondered lately whether Snape didn't know this, for he was keeping Harry later and later every time, while making pointed asides about Harry having to miss the good weather and the varied opportunities it offered. Harry was shaken from these bitter reflections by the appearance at his side of Jimmy Peaks, who was holding out a scroll of parchment. Thanks, Jimmy. Hey, it's from Dumbledore, said Harry, excitedly unrolling the parchment and scanning it. He wants me to go to his office as quick as I can. They stared at each other. Blimey, whispered Ron. I don't reckon he hasn't bound. Better go and see, and said Harry, jumping to his feet. He hurried out of the common room and along the 7th floor as fast as he could, passing nobody but Peeves, who swooped past in the opposite direction, throwing bits of chalk at Harry in a routine sort of way and cackling wildly as he dodged Harry's defensive jinx. Once Peeves had vanished, there was silence in the corridors, with only 15 minutes left until curfew. Most people had already returned to their common rooms. And then Harry heard a scream and a crash. Well, I don't know about the screaming, because I don't want to alert any of my family members, but a crash. Make of this what you will. There, I tried. He stopped in his tracks, listening. Oh, damn! You! Ah! The noise was coming from a corridor nearby. Harry sprinted toward it, his wand at the ready, hurtled around another corner, and saw Professor Trelawney sprawled on the floor, her head covered in one of her many shawls. Several sherry bottles lying beside her, one broken. Professor! Harry hurried forward and helped Professor Trelawney to her feet. Some of her glittering beads had become entangled with her glasses. She hiccuped loudly, patted her hair, and pulled herself up on Harry's helping arm. What happened, Professor? You may well ask, she said to her. I was strolling around, brooding upon certain dark portents I happened to have glimpsed. But Harry was not paying much attention. He just noticed where they were standing. There on the right was the tapestry of dancing trolls, and on the left, that smoothly impenetrable stretch of stone wall that concealed. Professor, were you trying to get into the requirement? Omens I have vouchsafed. What? She looked suddenly shifty. The requirement, repeated Harry. Were you trying to get in there? Well, I don't know students know about. Not all of them do, said Harry. But what happened? You screamed. It sounded as though you were hurt. Well, said Professor Trelawney, drawing her shawls around her defensively, and staring down at him with her vastly magnified eyes. I wish to, deposit certain, personal items in the room. And she muttered something about nasty accusations. Right, said Harry, glancing down at the sherry bottles. But you couldn't get in and hide them? He found this very odd. The room had opened for him after all, when he wanted to hide the Half-Blood Prince's book. Oh, I got in all right, said Professor Trelawney, glaring at the wall. But there was somebody already in there. Somebody in... Who? Demanded her. Who was in there? I have no idea, said Professor Trelawney, looking slightly taken aback at the urgency in Harry's voice. I walked into the room, and I heard a voice, which has never happened before in all my years of hiding. You see the room, I mean. The voice. Saying what? I don't know what it was saying anything, said Professor Trelawney. It was whooping. Whooping? Gleefully, she said, nodding. Harry stared at her. Was it male or female? I would hazard a guess at male, said Professor Trelawney. And it sounded happy. Very happy, said Professor Trelawney stiffly. As though it was celebrating. Most definitely. And then I called out, who's there? You couldn't have found out who it was without asking? Harry asked her, slightly frustrated. The inner eye, said Professor Trelawney with dignity, straightening her shawls and many strands of glittering beads, was fixed upon matters far outside the mundane realms of whooping voices. Right, said Harry hastily. He heard about Professor Trelawney's inner eye all too often before. And did the voice say who was there? No, it did not, she said. Everything went pitch black, and the next thing I knew, I was being hurled head first out of the room. Yeah, that would probably hurt. I'm kind of grateful she doesn't have any broken bones or anything. But then again, if she did, I'm sure Madame Pomfrey would love to use Scarecrow. Anyway, then you didn't see that coming, said Harry, unable to help himself. Oh, Harry. We love you too. No, I did not. As I say, it was pitch. She stopped and glared at him suspiciously. I think you better tell Professor Dumbledore, said Harry. You ought to know Malfoy's celebrating. I mean, that someone threw you out of the room. To his surprise, Professor Trelawney drew herself up at this suggestion, looking haughty. The headmaster has intimated that he would fewer visits from me, she said coldly. I am not one to press my company upon those who do not value it. Me too, Professor Trelawney. Me too. If Dumbledore chooses to ignore the warnings the cards show, her bony hand closed suddenly around Harry's wrist. Again and again, no matter how I lay them out. And she pulled a card dramatically from underneath her shawls. The lightning-struck tower, she whispered. Calamity, disaster, coming nearer all the time. Brilliant foreshadowing. I cannot talk right, apparently. Brilliant foreshadowing. That is just brilliant foreshadowing. As to why you're gonna have to wait. Right, said Harry again. Well, I think you should still tell Dumbledore about this voice. And everything going dark and being thrown out of the room. You think so? Professor Trelawney seemed to consider the matter for a moment. But Harry could tell that she liked the idea of retelling her little adventure. I'm going to see him right now, said Harry. I've got a meeting with him. We could go together. Oh, well, let's say. In that case, said Professor Trelawney with a smile. She bent down, scooped up her sherry bottles, and dumped them unceremoniously in a large blue and white vase standing in a nearby niche. A vase as a rubbish bin? Gotta make do with what you have, I guess. I miss having you in my classes, Harry, she said soulfully as they set off together. You were never much of a seer, but you were a wonderful object. Harry did not reply. He was being the object of Professor Trelawney's continual predictions of doom. Yeah, if she constantly made predictions about my doom, I would not be fond of it either. So, I feel you, Harry. I'm afraid, she went on, that I'm sorry, the centaur knows nothing of cartomancy. I asked him one seer to another, had he not too sensed the distant vibrations of coming catastrophe? But he seemed to find me almost comical. Yes, comical. In case you haven't heard me, I said N-A-G, not the other word. I would never ever use that other word. Her voice rose rather hysterically, and Harry caught a powerful whiff of sherry even though the bottles had been left behind. Perhaps the horse has heard people say that I have not inherited my great-great-grandmother's gift. Those rumors have been bandied about by the jealous for years. You know what I say to such people, Harry? The Dumbledore have let me teach at this great school, with so much trust in me all these years. Had I not proved myself to him? Harry mumbled something indistinct. I will remember my first interview with Dumbledore, went on Professor Trelawney in throaty tones. I was deeply impressed, of course, deeply impressed. I was staying at the Hog's Head, which I do not advise, incidentally. Bedbugs, dear boy. But funds were low. Dumbledore did the courtesy of calling upon me in my room. He questioned me. I must confess at first I thought he seemed ill-disposed toward divination. And I remember I was starting to feel a little odd. I didn't eat much that day. But then... And now Harry was paying attention properly for the first time, for he knew what had happened then. Professor Trelawney had made the prophecy that had altered the course of his whole life. The prophecy about him and Voldemort. But then we were rudely interrupted by Severus Snape. What? Yes, there was a commotion outside the door and it flew open. And there was that rather uncouth barman standing with Snape, who was waffling about having come the wrong way up the stairs, although I'm afraid that I myself rather thought he had been apprehended eavesdropping on my interview with Dumbledore. You see, he himself was seeking a job at the time, and no doubt hoped to pick up tips. Well, after that, you know, Dumbledore seemed much more disposed to give me a job, and I couldn't help thinking, Harry, that it was because he appreciated the stark contrast between my own unassuming manners and quiet talent, compared to the pushing, thrusting young man who was prepared to listen at keyholes. Harry dear? She looked back over her shoulder, having only just realized that Harry was no longer with her. He had stopped walking, and they were now 10 feet from each other. Harry? She repeated uncertainly. Perhaps his face was white to make her look so concerned and frightened. Harry was standing stock still as waves of shock crashed over him. Wave after wave, obliterating everything except the information that had been kept from him for so long. It was Snape who had overheard the prophecy. It was Snape who had carried the news of the prophecy to Voldemort. Snape and Peter Pettigrew together had sent Voldemort hunting after Willie, James, and their son. Nothing else mattered to Harry just now. Harry, said Professor Trelawney again. Harry, I thought we were going to see the headmaster together. You stay here, said Harry through numb lips. But dear, I was going to tell him how I was so shouted in the room. You stay here. Harry repeated angrily. She looked alarmed as he ran past her, round the corner into Dumbledore's corridor, where the lone gargoyle stood sentry. Harry shouted the password at the gargoyle, and ran up the moving spiral staircase 3 steps at a time. He did not knock upon Dumbledore's door. He hammered. There. And the calm voice answered, "Enter," after Harry had already flung himself into the room. Fawkes the Phoenix looked around, his bright black eyes gleaming with reflected gold from the sunset beyond the windows. Dumbledore was standing at the window looking out at the grounds, a long black traveling cloak in his arms. "Well, Harry, I promised that you could come with me." For a moment or two, Harry did not understand. The conversation with Trelawney had driven everything out of his head, and his brain seemed to be moving very slowly. "Come with you? Only if you wish it, of course. And then Harry remembered why he had been so eager to come to Dumbledore's office in the first place. "You found one? You found a Horcrux?" "I believe so." Rage and resentment brought shock and excitement. For several moments Harry couldn't speak. "It is natural to be afraid," said Dumbledore. "I'm not scared," said Harry at once, and it was perfectly true. Fear was one emotion he was not feeling at all. And I can totally relate to that. I don't really... Okay, let me explain something. I don't get scared easily, but that doesn't mean I'm immune to... I'm not... Okay. I don't get scared very easily. However, I am not immune to fear, and when I've been through something really traumatic, I'm like very vulnerable, and sometimes it's just, it takes a process to unwind from it. So yeah, I'm not immune to fear. I just don't get scared very easily. So yeah, moving on. Which Horcrux is it? Where is it? I'm not sure which it is, though I think we can rule out the snake. But I believe it to be hidden in a cave on the coast many miles from here. The cave I've been trying to locate for a very long time. The cave in which Tom Riddle once terrorized 2 children from his orphanage on their annual trip. You remember? Yes, said Harry. How is it protected? I don't know. I have suspicions that may be entirely wrong. Dumbledore hesitated, then said, Harry, I promised you that you could come with me, and I stand by that promise. But it would be very wrong of me not to warn you that this would be exceedingly dangerous. I'm coming, said Harry, almost before Dumbledore had finished speaking. Boiling with anger at Snape, his desire to do something desperate and risky had increased tenfold in the last few minutes. This seemed to show on Harry's face, for Dumbledore moved away from the window and looked more closely at Harry, a slight crease between his silver eyebrows. What has happened to you? Nothing, lied Harry promptly. What has upset you? I'm not upset. Harry, you were never a good Occamans. The word was the spark that ignited Harry's fury. Snipe! He said very loudly, and Fawkes gave a soft squawk behind them. Snipe's what happened. He told Voldemort about the prophecy. It was him, listening outside the door. Trelawney told me. Dumbledore's expression did not change, but Harry thought his face whined under the bloody tinge cast by the setting sun. For a long moment, Dumbledore said nothing. When did you find out about this? He asked at last. Just now, said Harry, who was refraining from yelling with enormous difficulty. And then, suddenly, he could not stop himself. And you let him take chair after... And he told Voldemort to go after my mom and dad! Breathing hard as though he was fighting, Harry turned away from Dumbledore, who still had not moved a muscle, and paced up and down the study, rubbing his knuckles in his hand and exercising every last bit of restraint to prevent himself from knocking things over. He wanted to rage and storm at Dumbledore, but he also wanted to go with him to try and destroy the Horcrux. He wanted to tell him that he was a foolish old man for trusting Snape, but he was terrified that Dumbledore would not take him along unless he mastered his anger. Harry, said Dumbledore quietly, please listen to me. It was as difficult to stop his relentless pacing as to refrain from shouting. Harry paused, biting his lip. And looked into Dumbledore's lined face. Professor Snape made a terrible... Don't tell me it was a mistake, sir. He was listening at the door. Please let me finish. Dumbledore waited until Harry nodded curtly, then went on. Professor Snape made a terrible mistake. He was still in Lord Voldemort's employ on the night he heard the first half of Professor Trelawney's prophecy. Naturally, he hastened to tell his master what he heard, for it concerned his master most deeply. But he didn't know. He had no possible way of knowing which boy Voldemort would hunt from then onward, or that the parents who would destroy his murderous quest were people that Professor Snape knew, that they were your mother and father. Harry let out a yell of mirthless laughter. He hated my dad like he hated Sirius. Haven't you noticed, Professor, how the people Snape hates tend to end up dead? I commend Harry for bringing this up, because it's rather apt, I would say. But I'm sure there have been some people he tolerated, and they've died long ago. So, I guess make of that what you will. I have no idea of the remorse Professor Snape felt when he realized how Lord Voldemort had interpreted the prophecy, Harry. I believe that to be the greatest regret of his life, and the reason that he returned. But he's a very good occupant, isn't he, sir? Said Harry, whose voice was shaking with the effort of keeping it steady. And isn't Voldemort convinced that Snape's on his side, even now? Professor, how can you be sure Snape's on our side? Dumbledore did not speak for a moment. He looked as though he was trying to make up his mind about something. At last, he said, I'm sure. I trust Severus Snape completely. Harry breathed deeply for a few moments in an effort to steady himself. It didn't work. No, I don't, said Malfoy. He said as loudly as before. He's up to something with Draco Malfoy right now. Right under your nose. And you still... We have discussed this, Harry, said Dumbledore, and now he sounded stern again. I have told you my views. You're leaving this cold night. And I bet you haven't even considered that Snape and Malfoy might decide to... To what? Asked Dumbledore, his eyebrows raised. What is it that you suspect them of doing, precisely? They're up to something, said Harry, and his hands curled into fists as he said it. Professor Trelawney was just in the room of requirement, trying to hide her sherry bottles, and she heard Malfoy whooping, celebrating. He's trying to find something dangerous in there. And if you ask me, he's fixed it at last. Yet you're about to just walk out of school without... Enough. Said Dumbledore. He said it quite calmly, and yet Harry fell silent at once. He knew that he finally crossed some invisible line. Do you think I have once left this school unprotected during my absences this year? I have not. Tonight when I leave, there will be again additional protection in place. Please do not suggest that I do not take the safety of my students seriously, Harry. I didn't, mumbled Harry, a little abashed, but Dumbledore cut across him. I do not wish to discuss the matter any further. Harry bit back his retort, scared that he had gone too far, that he had ruined his chance of accompanying Dumbledore. But Dumbledore went on. Do you wish to come with me tonight? Yes, said Harry at once. Very well then. Listen. Dumbledore drew himself up to his full height. I take you with me on one condition, that you obey any command I might give you at once, and without question. Of course. Be sure you understand me, Harry. I mean that you must follow such orders as run, hide, or go back. Do I have your word? Yes, of course. If I tell you to hide, will you do so? Yes. If I tell you to flee, you will obey. Yes. If I tell you to leave me and save yourself, you will do as I tell you. Harry. They looked at each other for a moment. Yes, sir. Very good. Then I wish you to go and fetch your invisibility cloak, and meet me in the entrance hall in 5 minutes' time. Dumbledore turned back to look out of the fiery window. The sun was now a ruby red glare on the horizon. Ooh, so pretty. Harry walked quickly from the office and down the spiral staircase. His mind was oddly clear all of a sudden. He knew what to do. Ron and Hermione were sitting together in the common room when he came back. What does he want? Said Hermione at once. Harry, are you okay? She added anxiously. I'm fine, said Harry shortly, racing past them. He dashed up the stairs and into his dormitory, where he flung open his trunk and pulled out the Marauder's map and a pair of balled-up socks. Then he sped back down the stairs and into the common room, skidding to a halt where Ron and Hermione sat, looking stunned. Got to be quick, Harry panted. Dumbledore thinks I'm getting my invisibility cloak. Listen. Quickly he told them where he was going and why. He did not pause either for Hermione's gaps of horror or for Ron's hasty questions. They could work out the finer details for themselves later. So you see what this means? Harry finished at a gallop. Dumbledore won't be here tonight, so Malfoy's going to have another clear shot at what he's up to. No, listen to me, he said. He hissed angrily, as both Ron and Hermione showed every sign of interrupting. I know it was Malfoy celebrating the room of requirement. Here, he shoved the Marauder's map into Hermione's hands. You've got to watch him, and you've got to watch Snape too. Is anyone else who you can wrestle from the DA? Hermione, those contact helmets still work, right? Dumbledore says he's put extra protection in the school. But if Snape's evolved, we'll know what Dumbledore's protection is, and how to avoid it. But he won't be expecting you not to be on the watch, will he? Harry, began Hermione, her eyes huge with fear. I have a good time to argue, said Harry curtly. Take this as well. He thrust the socks into Ron's hands. Thanks, said Ron. Why do I need socks? You need what's wrapped in them. It's the Felix Felicis. Share it between yourselves and Ginny too. Say goodbye to her for me. I'd better go. Dumbledore's waiting. No, said Hermione as Ron unwrapped the tiny little bottle of the golden potion, looking awestruck. I don't want it. You take it. I know what you're going to be facing. Okay, fine. I'll be with Dumbledore, said Harry. I want to know you guys are okay. Don't look like that, Hermione. We'll see you later. And he was off, hurrying back through the portrait hole and toward the entrance hall. Dumbledore was waiting beside the open front doors. Token. He turned as Harry came skidding out onto the topmost stone step, panting hard, a searing stitch in his side. I would like you to wear your coat, please, said Dumbledore, and he waited until Harry had thrown it on before saying, Harry, shall we go? Dumbledore set off at once down the stone steps, his own traveling cloak fairly stirring in the still summer air. Harry hurried alongside him under the invisibility cloak, still panting and sweating rather a lot. What will people think when they see you leaving, Professor? Harry asked, his mind on Malfoy and Snape. That I'm off to Hogsmeade for a drink, said Dumbledore. I sometimes offer as much of my custom, or else visit Hog's Head, or I appear to. It is a quick way of disguise hiding one's true destination. They made their way down the drive in the gathering twilight. The air was full of the smells of warm grass, lake water, and wood smoke from Hagrid's cabin. That does sound like a heavenly mixture. It was difficult to believe that they were heading for anything dangerous or frightening. Professor, said Harry quietly as the gates of the bottom of the drive came into view. Will we be operating? Yes, said Dumbledore. You can operate now, I believe. Yes, said Harry. I haven't no license. He felt it best to be honest. What if he spoiled everything by turning up 100 miles from where he was supposed to go? Yeah, probably for the better, Harry. No matter, said Dumbledore. I can assist you with him. They turned out of the gates into the twilight, deserted rain to Hogsmeade. Darkness descended fast as they walked, and by the time they had reached the street night was falling in earnest. Well, it's almost night here if you can't tell from my window there. Lights twinkled from windows over shops, and as they neared the three broomsticks, they heard vacuous shouting. "And stay out!" shouted Madame Rosmerta, forcibly ejecting a grubby-looking lizard. "Oh, hello, Albus. We're out late. Good evening, Rosmerta. Good evening. Forgive me, I'm off to the Hogshead. No offense, but I feel like a quieter atmosphere tonight." A minute later, they turned the corner into the side street where the Hogshead sign creaked a little, though there was no breeze. In contrast to the three broomsticks, the pub appeared to be completely empty. You know, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this before, but I would have loved to met Madame Rosmerta in the films. Like, who do you think would be a brilliant actress for her portrayal? Let me know in the comments. Moving on. "It will not be necessary for us to enter," muttered Dumbledore, glancing around. "As long as nobody sees us go. Now place your hand upon my arm, Harry. There is no need to grip too hard. I am merely guiding you. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Harry turned. At once there was that horrible sensation that he was being squeezed through a thick rubber tube. He couldn't draw breath. Every part of him was being compressed almost past endurance. And then, just when he thought he must suffocate, the invisible band seemed to burst open, and he was standing in cool darkness, breathing in lungfuls of fresh, salty air. And that is the end of this chapter. Join me next week for chapter 26, The Cave. And hopefully a fun surprise occurs then too. But until then, bye!